Good morning. It's good to see everyone here today. I don't know if you are aware. If you're not, it's probably not too late. Yesterday was Valentine's Day. Guys, this is a holiday that's celebrated mostly across the globe. There's a few countries that don't celebrate it, but a time to celebrate love. We tend to, at least on the romantic side of love. But I wanted to take the opportunity to talk about love. One of the features of Christianity, the characteristics of Christianity that should define us throughout the New Testament talks about how we should be defined by love for one another. Unfortunately, at times, that seems to be a little bit more difficult than others because, well, some of us just aren't as lovable as others. But nevertheless, it is the true mark of Christianity that we have love for one another. But not just one another, for the world around us, for the lost, for those who maybe we come into contact with every day. There's a chapter in the Bible that just so focuses on, more than any other, love. Defines what it should look like, the characteristics of love in 1 Corinthians 13. There's 15 different characteristics, and I want us to try today real quickly to breeze through each of those, to define those, to look at those, and what that means for us, and how we love. So the first thing here in 1 Corinthians 13 and verse 4 that we see is that love is patient. This is a word that literally means love is slow to anger. Maybe your version says long-suffering. Love can put up with a lot before it reaches the point of boiling over and turning into anger. It's not necessarily wrong to become angry. We see through Scripture that Jesus became angry at times when people were doing what they shouldn't be doing. For example, in Mark 3 and verse 5, the Pharisees were trying to trap Jesus. They had bad intentions in what they were doing, and he became angry at them. It's not necessarily wrong to be angry, but love says it should take us a while to get there, that we're more bearing with others. Love is patient. Love is kind. Now, this word more than any other, love is kind, represents what it is that you mean when you say they're a good person. I don't know how to describe them, but they're just a good person. Whatever we mean by that, that's what this word here means. Love is kind in the sense that it's good, and its goodness motivates the right kind of treatment of other people. It's the kind of love that when you go to a restaurant and you place your order and your order comes out and it's totally wrong, you don't blow up at that poor 16-year-old waitress who's trying to do her best to serve you. It's the kind of thing that leads us to sit in a waiting room longer than we feel we ought to, but not to blow up when it's not as fast as we want it to be. If you're the kind of person that makes a big deal out of those types of things and others along those lines, stop it. Sometimes things happen that are beyond the control of anybody around us, and a good person endures those things without losing their temper. Not everything goes our way all of the time. In fact, much of the time things don't go our way. But how do we respond in these moments? This is what communicates love. Love is patient. Love is kind. Love does not envy. Maybe your translation says, love is not jealous. Jealousy is one of those emotions that should never characterize the Christian. They should never say about us as Christians that they're just jealous. Well-known Greek philosopher Aristotle has a lot to say about emotions. One of the things that he says about jealousy is that there is never a situation in which jealousy is appropriate. You know, we spoke about anger and how at times anger can be appropriate as long as it's for the right reasons, as long as we're angry with the right people, as long as it's for the right amount of time and in the right proportion. Anger can be okay. Anger can be justifiable, but jealousy is never acceptable. Aristotle defines jealousy or envy in that it's a painful feeling at the sight of another's good fortune. Your neighbor down the street gets a new car. In your head, you're saying, they don't deserve that. They probably can't even afford the car payment. That's irresponsible of them. No, that's jealousy on your part. Somebody at work who you've been working with for years gets a promotion. I'm better than they are. I should get a promotion. I work harder every day. I show up to work before they do. I stay later than they do. I should be the one getting the promotion. That's jealousy. It should never characterize a Christian's behavior to be envious or to be jealous of another person. We should be those who celebrate others. We should be glad when someone gets ahead and when someone gets something that brings joy to their lives. We should hold up their hands. We should celebrate alongside of them rather than saying, why them? Why not me? It's not easy because we live in a world that promotes reasons to be jealous. But love doesn't do that. Love does not envy. The fourth characteristic is that love does not boast. The Bible talks a lot about boasting. The Bible tells us that it is okay to boast, just not about yourself. It's kind of tricky because for a lot of us, our favorite subject is ourselves. Most of the time when we talk, we feel most comfortable talking about ourselves. It's really easy to fall into the trap of telling other people how great we are, even if we're discreet about the way that we talk about how good we are. The Bible tells us in the Old Testament in Proverbs 27 and verse 2 to let another praise you and not your own mouth, a stranger and not your own lips. It's okay for people to think that you're the greatest thing ever. If other people say that, that's great. But don't you be the person who tells them that you're the greatest thing that's ever happened to the world. Paul takes it a little bit further. In 2 Corinthians chapter 10 and verse 17, he says, let the one who boasts, boast in the Lord. If you're going to brag, if you're going to boast, brag about God. Brag about the goodness that God has brought into your life. That's something worth boasting about. The things that you do well, God gave you the abilities to do those things. The skills that you have, God blessed you with those skills. So rather than talking about how good you are in these things, talk about how good God is to give you these abilities, these skills. Love does not boast. Fifth characteristic, love is not arrogant. Some translations are a little bit more literal here to say that love is not puffed up. This, of course, is literally what it means. If you're overinflated with yourself, you're arrogant. You know, if you remember back to elementary and learning about different words, you learned about an onomatopoeia. Words that sound like what they are. Words like buzz. In this instance, the word here for arrogant, the Greek word is what we would consider an onomatopoeia. The word is phusio. It's that sound like you pull the plug on an air mattress. You pull the nail out of your tire that you've run over, and that comes out, that overinflated, losing the air out of it. We're not to be puffed up artificially with something that doesn't belong. When we're arrogant, we're puffed up. We have an attitude that doesn't belong in the life, in the heart, and the minds of a Christian, or even a human being for that matter. 1 Corinthians 8, Paul's talking to the people there in Corinth, and he says, now concerning food offered to idols, we know that all of us possess knowledge. And this knowledge, he says, puffs up, but love builds up. The people in Corinth thought they were just a little bit smarter than the rest of the world around them because they understood something that not everybody else understood. It's amazing how so often education and intellectual arrogance go hand in hand. We think I'm a little bit smarter than you, so I'm a little bit better than you. I'm a little bit more arrogant about it, right? Paul says that just because you know something that somebody else doesn't know doesn't mean that you should think that you're better than they are, because love isn't arrogant. You see, love brings us down. Love lets the air out of our ego just a little bit, because love focuses on others, not on ourselves. Love is not arrogant. Love isn't rude. Literally, it says love does not disgrace itself. This is the term, a word often used in the Bible to characterize nakedness, which is something that ought to bring shame on people. Think back to the very beginning of the Bible in Genesis, when Adam and Eve ate from the fruit that brought knowledge of good and evil. The first thing they recognized about themselves, they were naked and ashamed. You see, before that point, before sin entered into the world, humanity had no sense of shame. Everything we did was purely with good motives. But after sin entered into the world, it became possible for us to be deceptive, to do things with impure motives. Love, however, is the kind of emotion that leads us to do things considering the long-term impact of a word, of an action in a particular moment. It helps us to make the right choice in the right circumstance. What brings honor over time? Is it to treat others with disrespect because, well, we're justified in treating them this way? They've earned this poor treatment. Or maybe we think that we're justified in the moment. Or is it something that builds harmony and peace over the course of time? You see, love is not rude. The seventh quality that Paul says is that love does not insist on its own way. Love does not seek its own things. Love is not self-centered. Love is not self-focused. You see, if we were to take a piece of blank paper this morning to write down all the things that you do in a course of a day, circle the number of things that you do entirely because you want to do them, and underline the things that you do because of someone else, what would the proportion look like? How many would be because you want to do them, and how many would be because you are doing it for someone else? My impression in reading the scriptures is that most of our activities ought to be motivated by a concern for others. We ought to be doing things to help other people. We ought to be doing things that lead other people to be better than they would be otherwise. And we need to be doing those things every single day of our lives. But you see, it's so easy to become focused on myself, to become focused on my own things. And goodness knows I have a lot of things going on to deal with. Most of us do. And so when we're focused on ourselves, we don't think about others. It's awfully hard for love to grow the way that it should when we're not thinking about others. Paul says in Philippians 2, verse 21, "For they seek their own interests and not those of Jesus Christ." See, it was a problem in the church in the first century that people were focusing too much on themselves. And it's still the problem today. Love does not insist on doing things its own way. Eighth thing is that love is not irritable. Do you know those people who are irritable? Maybe you think, well, sometimes I can gotta be irritable. You walk into your home and maybe there's something left on the floor that isn't supposed to be there, and you grumble, maybe you gripe and say, "Who left this here?" Know anybody like that? Somebody says something that you don't like. How dare you say that? You know anybody with a hair trigger? Did they just explode over even the slightest inconvenience? You probably work with people like that, right? There are a lot of people in our world who are just irritable people. They're looking for something to be wrong. They fixate on the negative, and when they find it, they're almost excited that now they have a reason. They have something to complain about and something to ruin the day of everybody around them. Love doesn't do that. Love is not irritable. And in fact, this is a word that occurs only here in the New Testament. It refers to people who are looking to get angry at something. People who that's their goal every day. It's the only thing that keeps them from being angry constantly is that they're just waiting for that moment. They're waiting for something to happen so they can be angry and they can let everyone around them know they fly off the handle. If that's the kind of person you are, I want to break some news to you that you're not a good person to be around. Don't be irritable. Let love into your life. The ninth characteristic is that love is not resentful. King James Version actually says that love thinketh no evil. And there's been a lot of conversation, a lot of confusion. People struggle with what does that mean? What it's come down to is that it's actually a term, an idea borrowed from the world of accounting. In the ancient world, in order to keep accounts, a person would carry a ledger. So whenever somebody would make a deposit, they would write that down beside their name, that they made a deposit. When they paid their taxes, they would write down that they've paid their taxes, and that a record would be kept. Maybe you're reading the New International Version and you see the New International Version does a really good job of translating this, that love does not keep a record of wrongs. Love is the kind of emotion that lets stuff go. I know people, and you do too, that you've said something to them that's hurt their feelings. You've said something to them and they remember that. They remember that for years. Their memory just holds on to that thing that you said that hurt their feelings, that thing that you said that offended them. And they're waiting for that time when you say something again and they say, "Do you remember on October 12th, 1994, when you said something just the same to me and offended me then?" And you're thinking, 1994, I don't know what happened then. But they hold on to those things. That's how some people are. They store up the faults of others, just waiting for the opportunity to use that against them and say, ha, this isn't the first time you've offended me, and so now we're truly done. Love knows how to forgive. Love lets stuff go. If you're the kind of person who struggles to forgive, if you're the kind of person who holds resentment in your heart, you're not the kind of person that's allowing love to grow and flourish in your life. Love is not resentful. And love does not rejoice at wrongdoing. Are you happy when someone else gets caught doing something they shouldn't have done? Sometimes people are. I was waiting for you to get caught. You deserve it. Love doesn't do that. Love doesn't get excited when somebody gets caught doing something they shouldn't have done. Love is brokenhearted when somebody sins against the Lord, especially when they're caught. Christians should be the kind of people to help. Christians should be those who bear one another's burdens when people struggle, not to rejoice at their wrongdoing. The 11th one goes along with that love doesn't rejoice at wrongdoing, but instead love rejoices with the truth. This means that my will is aligned with God's will. I want for people the same thing that God wants for people. In the Old Testament, the prophet Zechariah said that he advises love. It's really simple, to love truth and peace. To love truth and to love peace. If you're looking for a mantra to live your life by, love truth and love peace. You want harmony? You want people to get along? But you also want to uphold the law of God. You also want to exalt the truth as well, because that's what love does. Love understands that people need compassion. People need some space sometimes. People are going to do things that they shouldn't do at times. People are going to disappoint you, and we need to give them that space. But we should never compromise the law of God in order to restore a relationship. We have to love truth, but also love peace. Love rejoices with the truth. Number 12, love bears all things. This word just simply means you put up with stuff. You see, love can put up with a lot. You know, it's true. When you have those that you love, maybe it's your children, somebody close to you that does something that you wish they wouldn't do, it's a little bit easier to forgive them when you love them. Whenever your spouse says something to you that maybe it's a little hurtful, it's a lot easier to forgive them because you love them than maybe someone else who says the same thing to you and you want to be angry, you want to resent them, you want to hold that against them. Love puts up with things even when we would rather not. It leads us to be just a little bit softer. It leads us to be more forgiving. It leads us to be more open when we're annoyed. You see, love knows how to put up with a lot. Love bears all things. Love also believes all things. The word believes, as always throughout all of the Old and New Testament, means to trust. Committed trust in another person. There's a risk in loving somebody. Because in loving somebody, you sacrifice a little bit of your freedom, a little bit of your independence, and you offload that onto them and give them some control over your emotional well-being. You assign them part of your ego so they can control part of you. That's what love involves. But that's why love trusts all things. When I love you, I'm willing to give a part of myself to you, to give you control. That's what love is. If you don't ever do that, you maintain your independence, but without any sacrifice. There's never any glory, and to love people the way that Christians ought to is one of the most rewarding lives possible, even with the risk that's involved in it. Love believes all things. Love also hopes all things. This is the idea of hope that's not about focusing on the negativity of the present situation, but instead of the positivity of the future. Love is by nature optimistic. It assumes the best in others. It believes that our best days are yet ahead. You know, one of the great things, the most enjoyable things to do is to sit with a couple who've been married for a really long time. You know, the people who finish each other's sentences, the people who have lived together and been together so long that they kind of even started to look a little bit alike. But there are some couples who have been together so long, who have loved each other for so long. They're so close. One of the things that you seem to get from them is that they know that their best days in love are ahead, that they will continue to grow closer to one another each continuing day. They will love more tomorrow than they do today. That's what love is about. Love hopes for a better future than the present. And finally, love endures all things. The ability to hold up under pressure, that's what love is. James uses the same word to refer to the result of temptation as a result of enduring. We become stronger. He says, "Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet various trials, for you know that the testing of your faith produces patience, endurance, steadfastness." The idea is that the more you endure, the more you can endure. And the more a relationship endures together, the stronger it becomes over time. That's what love is. Jesus says in John 13 and verse 35, "By this, all people will know that you are my disciples if you have love for one another." Love is one of the most frequently discussed topics throughout the entirety of the New Testament. It characterizes the attitude, it characterizes the behavior that every Christian should have. It characterizes the attitude and behavior of every relationship that the Christian has. See, the world celebrates Valentine's Day as a commercial holiday in a lot of ways. A lot of chocolate sold, a lot of flowers. In fact, if you missed your opportunity yesterday or earlier in the week, you can probably get some pretty good deals on chocolate if you go to Walmart today, make up for missing out on the opportunity before. And our world, though, understands that there is value in love. It's a dream a lot of people never fully realize because they're never fully willing to sacrifice themselves. The ultimate example of love was taught to us when Jesus gave his life on the cross so that we might have hope. And if you've never been embraced in the arms of that kind of love in your life, I'd love to introduce you to my Lord, to experience the kind of love and care like you've never experienced before. Maybe it's the case that you're here today and you were once in love with God, but you've fallen out of love with him because you've chosen to focus on yourself. And when we focus on ourselves, there's no room for anyone else. Whatever your need might be this morning, we want to help you with that, to pray with you, to study with you, to encourage you, whatever that might be. If you need to respond to the Lord's invitation for any reason today, we want to encourage you to make your needs known. If you'll come forward right now while we stand and while we sing.